Welcome everyone. I am Amit Chopra, Managing Director, Shoes and Accessories. Today, we have well-known Indian brands that are at par with foreign brands who would share their opinions and experiences with us. What we understand is that it's an exciting as well as a daunting task to take your company global. Before embarking on the journey, which can entail huge demand on your time, bandwidth, and financial resources, you need to be very clear on the objective of taking your company global. In this global killer economy, you have to find a way to differentiate yourself or have very low prices. In the words of Jack Trout, the guru of marketing, the dictionary defines tyranny as absolute power that often is harsh or cruel. So it is with choice. With the enormous competition, markets today are driven by choice. The customer has so many good alternatives that you pay dearly for your mistakes. Your competitors get your business and you don't get it back very easily. Companies that don't understand this will not survive. Now that's cruel. Such is life. While I believe this critical factors for a brand to succeed overseas lies in 7 tudes. The firm's attitude, that's prioritization of global expansion. Aptitude, that's knowledge and skills. Magnitude, the ability to align opportunities with capabilities. Latitude, the ability to adapt. Rectitude, that's legal and ethical practices. And exactitude, the tolerance of uncertainty, as well as fortitude, the commitment to global initiatives. Put simply, companies with the highest rates of international success have more flexible internal processes, a clearer vision for international expansion, and greater determination to navigate the challenges that await them. We would like to take a deep dive into how brand businesses can expand its reach to other countries and drive more sales outside India. Well, let's understand from our panelists who have successfully taken their brands overseas. So what it takes to succeed overseas, what step one should follow. Before we turn the time to Mr. Gautam Mehra, Liner Shoes, let me share my experience. Well, when was the last time you checked to see if the 100-sheet claim on a box of tissues was true? Probably never. I don't know who does it. But then it's common practice in the industry to shortchange consumers. I have noticed brands that would consistently pack 95 pieces in boxes labeled as having 100 sheets. They're doing it because they know no one is going to check them and they won't get caught. Common as this may be, it's not a practice in which Gautam Mehra has taken part. Gautam Mehra believes that there is only one way to do things the right way. As managing director of Liner Shoes, he leads in a way that follows the highest ethical standards. One can pick up any left foot odd on his conveyor lines and match it randomly with any other right foot odd to make a perfect pair. Each foot odd is made to perfection. Let's turn the time over to Mr. Gautam Mehra, founder of Liner Shoes Private Limited and brand Vanilla Moon. Apart from manufacturing women's leather footwear for lifestyle brands across the world, Vanilla Moon retails in India and the brand is also available in boutique stores in Europe and Japan. Gautam, in the 80s, only a handful of brands such as Coca-Cola and IBM ruled the global stage. However, as the internet continues to lower the barriers to entering new markets and increasing the number of companies are able to achieve this level of influence, ensuring your brand remains relevant across the planet is a real challenge. As they say, you can only please some of the people some of the time. The conventional wisdom is we should aim to replicate what European or American or Japanese brands did in the 80s and 90s. So in your opinion, how different is the global environment and global value chain today from 30 years ago when the world started opening up? Please.
Well, I think, 30 years is a long time. And, you can see by you remarked on my salt and pepper hair, that means that I've been around in this business for 30 years at least. In these 30 years, there have been dramatic changes, both historically and technologically. Historically, we've seen the demise of the USSR, the formation of the EU, Brexit, and the rise of the East. And as far as technology is concerned, we moved from the era of the telex machine. That's what we used to use when I started business.
Right.
To video calls being normal. This kind of conversation that we're having.
Right.
Now, this has brought about a massive shift as well. During the early 90s, retail was still dominated by independent owner-driven stores. Markets were inefficient and there was long supply chains with factories, factory agents, wholesalers, sales agents on that side, retailers, and then the consumer, each adding to the cost that the consumer paid for. Large chain stores and global brands were much more efficient in purchasing and sourcing, which led to the demise of these independent businesses. Retail was dominated by those that had stores across the globe and had great R&D and could purchase goods from low-cost countries. We now see that the internet, as you said, is challenging these large retailers as well. It's now not necessary to have a physical store to make a sale. So people now have the choice to decide whether to visit a physical store or visit a virtual store. And this means further disruption as factories can now sell direct to consumers. Now, this could be another big game changer. In these last three decades, we've seen large changes in the global retail environment.
Sure. Yeah, I completely resonate. I remember my time with the telex machine, struggling to send messages. And today it's so convenient to just pick up the phone and,
Yeah, exactly.
Or whatever, yes. Thank you for that. Let me move on to Mr. Ambud Sharma, LIGO Brands. He's joining us from the US today. And I guess it's 4 a.m. in the morning with him. A serial entrepreneur, a seed investor with rich experience in direct-to-consumer brand, e-commerce, video technology, and retail. He's on his mission to build a 100 million luxury lifestyle brand, Escaro Royal. So Henry Ford said, stopping advertising to save money is like stopping your watch to save time. One way to emphasize the brand's symbolic value is through storytelling. It is very apparent that all luxury brands have a story to tell, from its founder stories to its sustainable efforts in connecting with society, with brands increasingly crossing international borders via the internet. Now, anyone can see the company's Facebook page or videos on YouTube. It's forcing brands to question, how do we get a single content story that works across all those markets? The consumers have become more focused on influencer brand storytelling. The focus should be on targeting the moments of next instead of moments of interruption. So Ambud, is this the time for brands to move beyond storytelling, put action behind their words and create powerful campaigns more than ever before?
Thank you for the opportunity to speak on this, sir. Right now, I think I'll talk from a luxury and premium standpoint in this, right? So there are various factions to the entire story. The various factions where the brands sit. Sometimes they sit on, the value proposition. Sometimes they sit on the legacy. Sometimes they sit on the aspiration. There are various factions on which they're sitting, right? Now, depending on where they're sitting, they will have to come up with the ideology behind what they want to do with their storytelling, right? Storytelling absolutely will be the cornerstone of the entire sequence of branding, the entire sequence of sales, right? Because eventually your branding will lead to sales. Else you're a commodity, you're not a brand, you're a label of sorts. So, selling on the price point is not something that is sustainable long-term, right? So there are 6 angles to this, the way I understand this. The first is the aspiration. What is the aspiration of the brand that is trying to kind of like project it out to the world, right? That is one part of it. The second is the storytelling itself. What is it that the consumer will connect to, right? What is the essence of the product, of the service, of the company, the values, etc., right? The legacy. Of course, one thing that we have seen is a lot of people in the world have started calling premium brands luxury brands. Luxury is not apologetic. It doesn't apologize for the price point it sits on. It doesn't negotiate. It dominates the customer, right? Whereas the premium brand actually does everything that a luxury brand doesn't do. It plays in a decent price point, but there are discounts, there is a churn, there is an understanding that they will have to move with the market. The legacy generally isn't there. It has to be created over time, right? The quality factor, of course, every time it's there. The differentiator is important, right? Most people actually are Me Too brands. They will come up with something that is a Me Too copy of, say, a European brand or an American brand, right? And the sixth most important part is the patience, which most people do not have, right? To be able to build something standard by standard. So to come to your point about storytelling, or towards going with the new age storytelling, which is the influencer-based storytelling, or understanding where the consumer brands sit, we have to understand these 6 angles and understand where the brand is operating at. If we do not understand how it operates, we'll just be another Me Too brand in the world of, the larger world of footwear, the larger world of brand making, right? From the Europeans, of course, we have this tendency in India to kind of look outside to the Europeans and say, oh, they are better than us, right? Whereas we do not understand that a lot of their products are made in India. So we are the factory. Now, how do we convert that factory using storytelling and branding into being, a little bit more than just a factory? And that is the point that I think a lot of people will be pondering upon. Short age storytelling or short form storytelling, which is typically done through your influencers. See, the problem with influencers is you cannot control your storytelling. You will have to put a product, they will be out in the system. You do not know what kind of essence they are providing while they are doing their own set of storytelling as well, because generally they kind of club in, multiple products into a single video or a single photo shoot, and they will try to say something, right? Influencing is one part of it. The rest is basically what are the values, how you are connecting into the consumer. And if it is just a price point that is making you, connect into the consumer, that is not sustainable. A loyal customer buys into the brand, not the other way around.
Sure.
That would be my, yeah.
Thanks.
So Ambud, interestingly, I think you've given us a new facet to the storytelling. What remains pertinent in the storytelling has really, gained a lot of momentum over the last maybe half a decade or so. It's a very critical tool or strategy to amplify the brand salience. It's probably what you are trying to indicate. Whatever geography that you will be operating on or operating in for that matter.
Yep.
Quite understandable. This is very important, sort of saying or narrative that don't find customers for your products, rather find products for your customers.
Right.
To me, I think it's a very powerful sort of a strategic kind of a narrative. And let me take another opinion this time now back to Mr. Mehra. Ambud spoke very passionately about the sort of a differentiation between a luxury brand and a premium brand, and the fact that he works very closely with the luxury brand, having created one he himself. Obviously, he's got a great sense of it. But you've been in a similar sort of a space as well. And what I'd like to ask you is that while there've been, few Indian brands per se who've been very well entrenched both in the footwear space and the sort of leather space, leather accessories, so to speak, the offshore market, and have resisted a very strong presence. And all of that has happened mostly in the last about a decade or so. The challenges to set up all of this, besides and beyond the tariffs, are enormous. There could be a situation wherein the newness of the market could be overwhelming. The established brands are already very glued to that culture, which is already sort of intrinsically there. So for any new incumbent sort of a brand in the making, there could be a lot of challenges. So what would be your thoughts, let's say if one was to create specifically a global leather brand, which ought to be successful overseas also, how could that sort of a proposition appeal the lead customers while sort of differentiating from the set standards that the other established brands have already put in the market? What could be those strategies in today's given times?
Well, I think that the simple answer is that to be successful globally as a brand, you need to have a USP. You need to be playing to your strengths, whether it's quality, design, price, or comfort, or a combination of them all. So the marketing and social media strategies also need to be tweaked to play to your strengths and need to be tweaked to each country that you're in. It's not, at least I find that with fashion, it can't always be, as Ambud said, the luxury brands are the ones that can sort of dictate that. It's anything else that's in the premium segment that you do need to sort of cater to what that country needs. And so, you know, you need to know who your target audience is, and, you know, you need to be able to target your media as well to them. And having a local partner in the country you're selling in would help. You know, this local partner could be in sales and media, in all those things, to give the idea of, you know, whatever the consumer needs there. And, you know, most importantly, the customer also has to have a great overall experience in your store or online for them to come back and recommend your name. So to build a global brand, you need to have all these ingredients, you know, your standout factor, your marketing, your local support, and a great experience for the customer.
Ambud, if I can maybe have a take on from you also on a slightly varied sort of angle to this, you know, entire discussion. You know, there's a paradox. There's Make in India that's being talked of. There's a Digital India that's being sort of talked of. There are already sort of brands in India which are going overseas. There are international brands which are already there in India, right? Part of the matter is all of us want Indian manufacturing space to really look at. Also, there is this case of, all of us talking of real comfort. A real comfort at times comes from patented technology also. You studied the subject, quite a bit. Now, the paradox that typically an Indian manufacturer sitting in India who would like to cater to both India and the overseas market typically could be two actually. To sort of broad base that technology platform and sort of, try to get into a sort of a mass market while retaining that USP. And obviously, work on economies of scale, considering that we are a large country and there's a potential as long as we're clear with the positioning. Alternatively, showcase India as a prime manufacturing sort of hub also, retain that cutting edge, create that premiumness, so to speak, and of course, operate on differentials while selling in India to similar kind of TG and likewise to overseas. But the overall scale could be very different, given these two different strategies. What could be the ideal way forward, given this kind of paradox that we see in the market?
Thank you, sir, for the question. See, the paradox that you talk about actually arises. Let's understand the root cause of why this paradox arises. And that's where the answer is, how do you actually break that paradox, right? What happens is that India is still seen as the factory, rather a third world factory into the leather business, right? We can say that we have good factories, we do very good in leathers, we have excellent tanneries, etc., etc. But at the end of the day, when a European actually shows up in India, when an American shows up in India, what they really see is not something that they connect to the world-class manufacturing standards, practices, machinery, etc., that is available outside world, right? We might be mimicking it, but look at the amount, the labor conditions. Look at the the grassroots level of manufacturing that happens in India. Mostly, I'm not talking about some of the larger houses, maybe the top 1% of the manufacturers. Now, when somebody looks at that, they say, okay, I can take this really good product, slap a label on it, and basically retail it out to the world, and that will basically sell because the quality is good, the craftsmanship is good, etc., etc. The first paradox that the first breakage of the paradox would be to basically invest in design. We as a country do not believe in investing in design. Wherever I look, all I see is, here's a Nike and here's an Indian copy of it, right? Or here's an Adidas and here's an Indian copy of it. We have not invested in design and also the development of the new age technologies, which the Europeans and the Americans are really good at. They look at the consumer demand, they look at the consumer factors, and they look at what the consumer wants and then incorporate that backward, integrate it into the product, right? So when the consumer actually does go into the market, they have a product that they were looking for, right? That doesn't happen in India. Very often I've seen that there is either a design sequence that is going on well, but the comfort sequence is not. And the four USPs that Gautam sir talked about, those are generally mismatched. They are not, from an Indian standpoint. Now, how does somebody break that paradox? First is invest in design, invest in storytelling, and invest in why we can be a good alternative to an American, a European, or a Japanese brand, right? We really cannot break through the legacy part of it because most of the companies abroad have a 200-year-old legacy or 250-year-old legacy, right? Atelier, for example, or Johnston & Murphy. You cannot really create that overnight. So in order for us to be able to do that, there is that. What are the vehicles to do that, right? Those vehicles are easily available today. The first is basically the technological penetration, right? Understanding, doing your storytelling, doing your branding through technological innovations available in the world, right? The second is basically going through some of the chains that are known to be working with some of the luxury and premium brands. I've seen a lot of people, in order to save little money, they actually go with some of the chains or some of the houses that are not very well known. They are operating on the fringes and not really going into the deep markets, right? Only once you go into the deep markets, you can actually get the kind of visibility or the kind of authenticity, to speak, that we talk about. Make in India and everything is good. I think it's more to do with sloganeering. But when it really comes down to doing things right, branding, manufacturing, design, and everything else has to kind of move towards to actually break that paradox.
Great. Yeah. Amit, your take?
Yeah. So, Ambud, coming back to you, the differentiating idea, this is what I've been looking at. A lot of brands I've been following. So to be different is to be not the same. To be unique is to be one of a kind.
Right.
It's impossible to talk about powerful global branding without mentioning Nike and Adidas.
Right.
The secret is understanding that your differentness does not have to be product related. A product or service can be differentiated by feature, leadership, preference, heritage, speciality, whatever, how it's made, and on and on. So what are you focusing on as Escaro Royal?
So we work in a very different angle. For me, I do not go the Nike route. There are two angles of it, right? The first is the Nike route, and the second is the Apple route. Just to give you an analogy, right? Nike sells a commodity, right? It sells footwear, it sells shoes. Yes, there is a lot of R&D in it. Yes, there are a lot of trending in it. Yes, there is a lot of material research in it. But at the end of the day, what they take is they take the product and they connect it to the product of the product, not the product directly. As you talked about the USPs, etc., etc. They don't do none of that, right? They don't talk about the material. They don't talk about the technology much. What they talk about is how is the elite athlete using it? What is it in the elite athlete that actually connects back into the story of the brand? That's what they do, right? The consumer is always looking for a sports shoe, right? That's one part of it. The second is Apple. Apple, Steve Jobs said, the entire analogy was, okay, look for your customer, look what the customer wants and feed whatever they want into the mix, in the product mix, right? Apple went the other way around, said, I will tell the consumer what they want. I will tell the consumer what they desire, right? I will give them the aspiration to look for something better than a Moto Razor, which was the excellent flip phone in 2007, right? I'm going to give them something that they haven't experienced before. So we stand somewhere in the middle of these two. We have to be a commodity. It is a footwear, right? We operate into multiple. We are actually a men's fashion, premium fashion or luxury fashion company, rather than being just a footwear company, right? We are not operating only in footwear. We are operating in other subcategories as well. But what we do is we come out with designs that are horrendous to most people, right? And we also have a mix within that, which is the normal bread and butter, the black and browns, the monks, standard stuff. And we try to kind of like rip through that angle with the Indian market to see where we can make a differentiator based on design, where we can make the differentiator based on branding and storytelling. Right? That is what our angle looks like, a commodity with an Apple approach, rather than either or. Right. So that is my approach.
I mean, very interestingly, Amit, I think it's made a very interesting analogy, and I think a new set of insights for us. But in today's time and age, it's very important to learn and relearn. We often talk of learning, unlearning, and relearning, right? And I see no harm in today, picking up best examples and best practices from some of the other brands and some of the other categories. You spoke about Apple. About in every deliberation, Apple does come up for that matter, right? And then similarly, there are examples of other examples also. Now, I'd like to go back to Mr. Mehra. Let me cite another example. Coca-Cola, way back in 2000, spoke of a philosophy or a strategy wherein they wanted to come back and say, think local and act local. Worked out well. They could sort of spread the network wherever for that matter. But in today's digital age, think global and act local, maybe look at it from a very different prism altogether. And then we have this case of brands like McD for that matter, Pizza Hut for that matter, Airbnb for that matter. Who would have liked to sort of go in for Airbnb? It must have been quite a bit of struggle to stay in somebody's else's house. There would have been a fear factor, but all those thoughts were dispelled over a period of time because of good understanding of localization, just not localization, but by local storytelling also. One wants to draw an analogy when closer to our trade, let's say for a leather footwear, sort of business. Given the landscape that all of us are seeing today, how is it that an entrepreneur should look at? Should there be a single worldview? Should we look at a sort of a unique positioning? Should we look at a unified philosophy? Or we should be sort of more open-ended towards, a strong sort of a localization pitch to make a better impact in the market, especially the newer markets?
Well, I can speak firstly from our own experience, because we sort of went the other way around. We went trying to sell as a brand first in Europe and then sell in India. And what we found was that it doesn't always work that way. That whatever works in the UK, for example, doesn't work necessarily in India. So I would say that, of course, certainly tweak it to the country that you're trying to sell to. You got to understand it culturally and then sell the product based on whatever that culture is. So far, up to now, global brands, say you take even in fashion, there was Gap at one time, and that was the US. Everybody aspired to, be the same as Americans, the casualness. It sold the whole lifestyle across the movies to everything else. So it was easy for a brand like that to go across several countries or, become a real global brand. For footwear, especially an Indian company, and you want to sell in India as well as abroad, you got to, there are two different markets, I find. India in itself is a continent, with all our multiculturalism within the country itself. So, from my point of view, I think that understanding each country is essential. Japan's a different market to Europe and and the US, and India and Africa is different. So it's not going to be simple to just send one thing out, especially when it comes to fashion sensibilities, colors, and to see where things really sell well. India is such a marriage-driven market as well from the luxury point of view. So it depends on where you pitched yourself. But I would think that look at it more country-wise or block-wise than just one thing being sold everywhere.
So you're again talking of convergence in terms of both localization and differentiation. We're coming back to the same point, I guess.
Yeah. Yes.
What would you suggest for scaling across geographies? What strategy should be adopted by Indian brands for generating demands, particularly for Indian brands? Should we go for more Indianness, or I don't know, or is it pricing? A lot of exporters struggle with this.
No, I think it depends on which. Are you catering to that Indian diaspora? That Indian diaspora is also across the world. So there are brands. I mean, I've seen clothing brands which I think somewhere in the subcontinent, not be India, called Khadi, for example, where they've got stores in the UK. And it caters to the Indian diaspora, and there is enough of a population there that will look at things like that. But I feel that to be global, you've got to have a product that doesn't only appeal to the Indian sensibility. For sure, one should be looking at whatever that USP is that I talked about earlier.
Right. Yeah, as you said, I see brands like Haldiram, Dabur, they do very well overseas because there's a big Indian population who consume the typical Indian product. But then somehow we're not able to baptize or get a larger chunk of the international consumers. So certainly the brands need to look at an international look, or even the imagery. That's very important, I believe.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
Well, sorry, it just struck me. I was surfing the net while Ambud was talking about influencers. And it's amazing when Elon Musk makes a comment, which he did just 2 days back, about he tweeted game stonk. And the stock of that company went 92.7% up. It's some gaming company. And then he praised an e-commerce company, Etsy, saying that he bought a gift for the from the site for his dog. The shares of Etsy soared as 8.6%. So somewhere influencers do play a big role, I believe, in today's world. Sorry, Vikas, please take over.
Yeah. In fact, as a matter of fact, since you spoke about a contemporary news, and I need to ask two back-to-back questions to Ambud on this. Ambud, the economic survey has just been released a few hours back. It's just on the net. And it talks about India, and there is a 7.7% aggregate sort of contraction to the GDP, which is way better from what it was in the first quarter of the last fiscal, right? We being sort of projected a far better scenario, going forward. But all said and done, this whole buzz of this online business, and you do that in US and you do that in India. How is it going forward? This is really going to be playing a very critical role in sort of galvanizing the market both in India and overseas, because for the longest time now, we've been talking of customer acquisition, we're talking of GMVs, we're talking of the marketing spends, we're talking of marketplaces, all possible terminology. What has also been seen in the market is that the market has moved from fashion to essentials quite a bit. I mean, because of the pandemic, and that adoption and those habits have really stayed on, right? This would have a different connotation when it comes to a luxury brand to a premium brand. It's in our segment. How do you see the taste and sort of this adoption changing in the times to come now, given the landscape that we are in now, both in India and overseas?
Right. So from a luxury standpoint, I'll just talk from the luxury standpoint, and then I will talk about from a utility standpoint, right? So luxury, as I said earlier, is not apologetic, right? It doesn't really care much about the price points and the other things because it's immaterial. After a certain level, the consumer, for that consumer, it's immaterial because they're not looking where they're going to get their next, the utility payment into gas payment or their electricity bill or where it is going to come from. They're not looking at the utility part of it, right? So they're still kind of like, buying into the dream, buying into that equation where they are looking at to being the elite. Even if they're sitting at home, they're wearing a Gucci slipper. They're not really caring about, buying a Relaxo slipper for that matter, just to save money, right? That's not going to happen. So there are two things that will actually, drive economy, right? One is the essentials, the utility economy, and the second is the aspirational economy. And anything in the middle is going to get crushed. Unfortunately for Indian brands, that is where most of us lie, right? That is where we are operating. We are operating in trying to be aspirational, but we are more utility oriented. And when shit hits the fan, for lack of better term, you are looking at people not buying stuff or delaying their gratification for new footwear or new shirts or new suits, etc., right? Especially from a mid-tier middle class segment, not lower middle class or an upper middle class, but mid-tier middle class, which kind of makes up about 35-40% of the economy, effectively, right? So how does the online and the other the other angles of attack come into the picture when it comes to how the economy is going to behave or how the product mix is going to behave? I think people have already started looking at creating products that are more diverse in the usage of the product, right? Something that you can wear to the office and then you can wear it to the evening party as well at the same time, or something that can be worn in-house and then you can wear that same thing going outside, right? So that differentiator of ye ghar ka hai, ye bahar ka hai, ye party wala hai, etc., that's gonna go away eventually. There's a consumer, not only the sentiment but also the consumer utility faction that's gonna shrink into the product. So the product mix itself is gonna get simplified at some point, right? That's the first part. The second thing is that as we push towards going into the luxury segment and pushing towards that vanity part of it, because at the end of the day, when you actually put people in their homes, not having access into the physical retail or physical gratification into going and buying things, eventually what's going to happen is the people with the money will go ahead and make exorbitant purchases, because not only they are not looking at utility, they're looking at gratification at a different level. They are looking at, that endorphin rush to buy a new Hermes bag or a new Louis Vuitton shoe or a Gucci belt, right? It is more than that. Understanding that that these luxury brands or the premium brands, the dream that they bring with them is what drives their sales, not the utility, right? And that is where we Indian brands get stuck. We are always talking about the me likes, okay, me too, let me take this brand and copy their essence and see if it kind of works out or not. We're still stuck with that, like 50 years, 60 years, 70 years, however the industry, how old the industry is, we're still getting stuck. Let me make a copy of Louis Vuitton. Let me make a copy of this. Like, let me try to see how they do their imaging and I try to copy that. The differentiator is they do their material research, their emotional research on the customer, and we don't. And that has to change if we have to kind of go into the global mode with the online presence, with the vehicles that are available. So
absolutely.
Do we have Ishaan also with us now?
Yeah.
what's that? Oh, sorry.
Ishaan, are you there with us now?
Yeah, I'm here.
Welcome, Ishaan.
Sorry for a little delay. I got a little messed up. Sorry for that.
Thank you for joining us. I'm pleased to introduce Mr. Ishaan Sachdeva to you. He's the marketing director for Alberto Torresi. And Alberto Torresi, an offspring of the famed Verola group of companies, based out of Agra, India. And Verola is one of the leading, largest manufacturers, exporters, OEM supplier, and is very successfully running its own brand, Alberto Torresi, which is widely available now in the Indian market, both through offline and online. I'm very happy to share with you that Ishaan has done pioneering work in the D2C category as far as the online business goes. Interestingly, Alberto Torresi, as the label was first introduced in Italy. Since then, the Italian European pitch has been very, very strong. It came back to India in 2010, Ishaan, if I'm correct. And our decade of legacy, it's something that has been really created. Wonderful, fantastic sort of a proposition. And they've already sort of defined a complete set of target customers for them and created a niche for them. But Ishaan, from the brand perspective, from a manufacturer's perspective, from export perspective, you're just about into everything. Great legacy that you created for the group. Given that there are a lot of challenges, going forward, but while you already have a very strong brand proposition, you have this challenge of sort of, setting it up in India more vigorously and also simultaneously launching it, parallel in many other countries also across different channels of sales. And then there's this make in India pitch also. So given that, how are you going to be balancing your strategy, given that the group is very progressive? And what could be your message to the industry in the given landscape today that we have?
Well, thanks for such a great introduction. And so this is quite a vast question to answer. So I'll try to break it up into various parts and try to answer it. So for the Indian perspective, or rather for the current COVID perspective, what has happened is that the adaptation, both in terms of tech as well as the expectation of the customer, has really catapulted us for years and years in the future. So anything which would have been adapted by the customer in 5 or 6 years has already been adapted. That may be in terms of, you would see that the technology business is booming like anything. Now, each and everybody is getting more and more into artificial intelligence and stuff like that. So this entire thing is definitely impacting our industry in a much, much stronger way. And it is going to impact us much more than what we have already seen. The reason being that now, the way we do our research, the way we decide what we have to make will change more and more because of tech getting into it, more advanced way of identifying what to make, how to make, and how to target the customer is going to impact our industry in a very, very massive way. So just to share our experience, so post-COVID, what we feel now, by the time the summer hits, our range would have changed by 80-85% in a year itself. So the type of offering we were doing before COVID and we're doing right now has changed tremendously because the consumption patterns have changed across the board. The type of footwear, the type of products which the customers now want is something which is a little different, because homeware, which is definitely much more important, especially in the Indian context, which was practically invisible earlier on. And as Ambud said, that the concept of wearing it at home as well and wearing it outside also, that is also going to impact and change the way we decide what to make and how to make. Well, now, so like I said, this actually has impacted us on what sort of designings we're about to do, and also because of this tech way and the reason why customers were so free at home, they've been bombarded with a lot of concepts, a lot of newness, because everybody has tried to come out with something new. Customer has become more demanding because they've become much more aware. So now they're going to expect much more from what the existing brands are over there. They would want to really see something new rather than what they were earlier offering. Now in the international context, well, I guess that's been covered pretty well in this seminar over here, that the reason why we as Indians don't tend to be successful outside is because first of all, we don't have any such good story of which is not based on just the Indianness of it, or any brand performing abroad which is not backed by the Indianness part of it. And the biggest point of that is because there's no creativity involved. There is this factor of I take this inspiration from here, I take this inspiration of here, and because our mindset is primarily utilitarian, right? You would see a lot of brands coming outside which brings something very, very new and something different. But will that come from an Indian brand? That's something which has actually never happened before. You would see that, okay, this Indian brand is making a good product, but it has been done by somebody else and they just improved upon that. But it's not something which is really out there and created something brand new. And that is why we don't get the look of it, because because of the product part of it. Secondly, the way the product, or rather the promotion, is done outside India is very different from how it is done here. You said influences are something which are very raw in India, but they're very strong abroad, right? Celebrities in India are strong, but they're far, far stronger abroad. So the way they are able to, the global market, the way we have to target the customer in the global market is something which we need to learn and understand. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of experience or literature available which can really train us to that. And doing experiments in an overseas market is a far more expensive exercise than it would be in India. So that's it. So right now we have a good possibility because the market is practically virgin now because of the COVID, everything. There's a lot of equalitarian thing which has happened. The market is quite free now. Anyone and everyone can enter. But we as brands, or rather we as consortium, if we can develop something and attack the market together in such a way that the look or the visibility comes to us, only then and only then we'll be able to perform, because we're just we're too invisible when it comes up to markets abroad.
So, you know what, you preempted me. I wanted to ask you the same question. You've already answered my question and I'm blank right now. But I know, and I'm sure a lot of people would know, that you have a substantial portfolio of global brands with you. You've got Ecology, you've got Stressless, Betty Stressless, Alberto Torresi, which are all retailing abroad. And you've lately written a book as well. You've authored a book on e-commerce. So what would you suggest, to an Indian company, exporter, manufacturer? What is an easier way to take my brand abroad? Should I go online, or should I still go seeking for distributors?
Well, that's a secondary question. First, you need to decide what you want to sell over there and how you want to, be visible over there. Because as of now, like I just said before, you really need to focus and decide on that. We've also done the same thing, and we made this mistake also. We've tried to go to US, we've tried to go to Malaysia also. We did a small test, and that's what the learning which we have received from over there is, that you really need to first decide what you have to offer. Right? It really doesn't matter that if you make this product for this brand or you make this product for this brand, you make your good brand in India. It really does not matter. When you're attacking that market, you really have to find out what that market needs and how you're able to satisfy it in a way which is better than what the existing market says. And price is just one factor of it, not the only factor, because we only decide India mein sabse badi cheez ye ho jati, we say that okay, we are able to make it cheapest, let's do it. But if you're able to make it cheapest, then it has to be at least half the price of what the world offers. Only then you get the recognition, rather the visibility for it. Other than that, you really need to have something very different, very new, very attractive, which the customer really laps it up.
Right. Thanks. Vikas.
You mute, Vikas. Vikas, you're mute.
Yes, Ambud. My left out question to you. In fact, homegrown brand Royal Sparrow has made so much of waves for the last couple of years here. And, all this is primarily because of your great understanding of, customer insights, the product requirements, and you obviously very aptly use the technology platform also, which has enabled you to sort of, get quickly into the US market as well. I understand that you would be getting Europe also. And you will be happy setting up your own platform, that being your primary driver in terms of the, the D2C part of it, so to speak, right? Also sitting in US, you're controlling both your US, Europe business and the Indian business sitting on the US. It goes on to prove that, you have both a bird's eye view as well as a ringside view of what's happening in the Indian industry. I've also been told that you're also advising to, the government bodies also here in India, at least one that I know of. Given that, what would be your 360-degree assessment sitting, miles away in terms of how industry needs to, move forward? You spoke about originality and design, so did Ishaan for that matter. But for people here in India, the business owners who are either into manufacturing, sourcing, or brand building, what is that you think ought to be done so that we actually get to, attain the potential that we all been very passionate about, besides and beyond the, programs that the government has announced? But the entrepreneur thing in terms of what is it we actually need to do, it's something that you can, I think, you can really enlighten all of us. Please share your thoughts on that.
So I will. I'm kind of known across to say my mind. So I don't want to ruffle too many feathers by saying this, that the first angle would be to be honest with ourselves as a country, as not only as a country but as an industry. What do we want to do? As Ishaan said earlier, what do we want to offer is still a question mark, right? Right now, what we are offering is factory, cheap labor, material that is sometimes good, sometimes not that great. We are offering far too many things to far too many people. We worship our importers. We like the Gora coming to our country and buying stuff while we go and show them the Taj Mahal. All of that is actually a statement of our inferiority, not our superiority. Let's be extremely honest about that as a country, as an industry, right? That's the first part. The second part is, what is our differentiator? When we can provide the same thing to the world, why can't we provide an excellent piece to our own consumer? Why are we feeding them 399 rupee product, right, when the market has moved up for better quality products? As our middle class goes up, right? Of course, I'm not taking into account the COVID angle and how the BPL line has moved or whatever, right? Or the middle class has moved down or up. I'm not talking about those things. I'm just talking from a 30-year view or a 50-year view standpoint, right? What do we have to offer as a country to the outside world, and what do we have to offer as a country to our domestic market, right? That is important for us to understand, right? As Ishaan said very rightly, price can never be the only factor. You go to Amazon today, you go to Flipkart, the first thing they tell you is cut the price it's going to sell. And that is precisely what's wrong with the industry, right? When somebody says, I want to sell a chappal at 39 rupees, you know what you're telling the entire world? We will remain a third world country because we don't have a market for a 3999 slipper. That's what we are trying to tell the country, the outside countries, right? That's one part of it. The second is the policy standpoint itself. There are so many lacunas in the government policies that do not let us, go ahead and become the world's, the powerhouse in design, or the powerhouse in manufacturing, or the powerhouse in some. Look at China. I mean, I was in those factories where they have beautifully done factories, excellent facilities for their workers, medical facilities, etc. Do we have a tenth of that in our country? A tenth? Forget that. Fifth, like 5% of that. No, we don't, right? We have to be very careful with what we assume, what we aspire to be, and how we want to proceed as a country from a macro standpoint and a micro standpoint both, right? How do I see India being the contributor to the outside world? I don't at this point, to be quite honest with you, I don't see India to be a contributing factor to the outside world except for manufacturing. We can have our labels around the world. We can take them to the Europeans. The Europeans are not accepting it. The Americans, they first come, okay, at this price point, why should I go ahead and buy an Indian brand? I know where it's made. I can Google. I can figure out where it's made. I know what like India and Bangladesh have the same problem. Bangladesh is trying to kind of like push their brands into textiles around the world, right? They are making dry fit for Nike. Why can't they put their own label on it and sell it in the United States? They are not able to do that because everybody knows where it's made and how it's made. There are news around, on child labor, on policies that are diminishing the Indian industry, in the Bangladeshi industry. All of that is there. So as a country, if we have to move forward, we have to change our mindset first, then change our practices, stop fooling ourselves that we are brand owners. We are not. We are label owners. We're somewhat trying to kind of mimic the West. And if we are able to do that and play on our strengths of design in a traditional form, then we can actually move forward. That would be much.
Thanks. Well said. Let me get back to Gautam. So better products don't win. Better perceptions tend to be the winners. They say truth will not win unless it has some help along the way. So every aspect of your communication should reflect your difference. This is what the advertising world says. So your advertising, your brochures, your website, your sales presentations, as global brands strategize their competitive move, they're likely to either follow a cost leadership strategy or a differentiation strategy. So like luxury brands follow a differentiation, not a mere product attribute. They aggressively differentiate their brand experience. Like airlines, always consistently follow a differentiation strategy. But the basis for the differentiation are its overall cost structure and its corporate culture and so on. So simply said, one must differentiate or die. What would work well for a mid-market brand according to you? I mean, what works well for your brand? Differentiation or is it overall cost?
I think straight up, it's a combination of the two. It's not. Everybody's talked about design as a key aspect, and that is essential. That uniqueness of design, the uniqueness of construction, the uniqueness of whatever you're doing, and the combination with the price. For example, for us, our brand JVAM, which is Japan Vanilla Mold, it's sold mainly in Japan and now in India, is a gender-neutral fashion brand with high quality inputs, and it focuses on comfort. It's fashion and comfort, and it's edgy fashion. It's not run-of-the-mill fashion. So there again, that's the differentiator for us. The differentiator is to put that comfort into that fashion. And the proof of the pudding is really in wearing the product. Once you want it, you're not going to go back. So when we know that there's no other product like it at that price point anywhere in the world, that's something that's makes us different, as well as you're combining the value part in it. We sell through some of the most respectable, trendy stores in Japan and in India, and therefore the perception of the brand also is automatically high. So these things sort of help in it all. You talked about perception, and that's essential. And so I'd advise also that a mid-market brand, use a combination of that uniqueness in their product and attractive pricing to help at least, enter the market and then stay there. Again,
Right.
having right partners also, to help you understand that market that you're in. The media has got to help you. Your storytelling has got to help you put that message across as to why you're that different and why people should buy you.
Sure. Thank you so much. I'm really enjoying this session. Unfortunately, we've come to the end of time for this session, so it's time to conclude. It's been very interesting, and I enjoyed the afternoon conversing with you all. So before I sign off, my takeaway is, the viewers also should get a little learning from all of you. And idea is that learn from the mistakes of others. These people sitting out here. You all can't live long enough to make it yourself. Thank you all. Thank you very much. Have a very good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.